November 1990. Inside the House of Commons, grown men in suits are shouting, not about war, not about the economy. They are shouting about a car. A member of Parliament rises to his feet and demands that a British-built family saloon be banned from sale. His words, "It should not be available for public purchase." Another MP compares driving it to needing the skill of a Formula One champion. So what was this terrifying machine that frightened Parliament itself? It looked like nothing. A four-door Vauxhall, the sort of grey saloon your bank manager drove. Same shape as the car sitting in 10,000 suburban driveways. From across a car park, you would walk straight past it. But under that ordinary bonnet sat a twin-turbocharged engine built by Lotus, 377 horsepower, a gearbox borrowed from an American supercar, and a top speed of 177 miles per hour, making it, at that moment, the fastest four-door car on the entire planet. Here's the part that made the establishment panic. Britain's police cars of the day struggled to reach 90. This thing could do nearly double that. The law, quite literally, could not catch it, and when criminals worked that out, all hell broke loose. If you enjoy forgotten British car stories like this, consider subscribing. There are many more coming every week. This is the story of the Lotus Carlton, the car that was too fast, too cheap, and too dangerous for the people in charge to tolerate. They tried to kill it in Parliament. They tried to shame it in the newspapers. So stay with me, because what Britain built here embarrassed Ferrari, outran the police, and became a legend precisely because the establishment hated it. And before we start, if you think a car should never be banned just for being brilliant, type "let it run" in the comments right now. To understand why this car existed at all, you have to understand where it came from, and that's the first shock. It didn't come from Ferrari, it didn't come from Porsche, it came from Vauxhall, a brand that, in Britain in the 1980s, meant sensible, reliable, ordinary. The badge on the car your dad drove to the office, but behind Vauxhall stood the giant American company General Motors. And in 1986, General Motors had bought Lotus, the small, brilliant British sports car firm based in Norfolk, the one founded by the genius Colin Chapman. Suddenly, the same company owned a maker of dull saloons and a maker of world-beating sports cars. The boss of Lotus, a man named Mike Kimberley, looked at that and saw an opportunity nobody else did. What if you took the most boring possible car and secretly gave it the heart of a supercar? The base car was the Vauxhall Carlton, specifically the 3000 GSi, a perfectly nice, fastish executive saloon. On its own, nothing special. But Lotus didn't want fastish. Lotus wanted to build a weapon, so they tore into it. And what they did next is why this car became a legend. Lotus took the standard 3-liter engine and enlarged it to 3.6 liters. Then they bolted on not one, but two Garrett turbochargers. The result was that monstrous figure, 377 horsepower, at a time when a Ferrari 348 supercar made under 300. Just stop and think about that. A Vauxhall with more power than a Ferrari. But here's the problem the engineers ran into. No European gearbox they could find was strong enough to handle all that force. It would simply tear itself apart. So Lotus went shopping in America and fitted the 6-speed manual gearbox from the Chevrolet Corvette ZR1, one of the toughest units on Earth. The gearing was so tall that in first gear alone, the Carlton would pull all the way to around 55 miles per hour before you even reached for second. They fitted huge AP racing brakes at all four corners, wider wheels, a rebuilt suspension, and gave it flared arches and a subtle rear spoiler, and that was the beauty of it. From the outside, it whispered. Under the skin, it screamed. When the road testers finally got hold of it, the numbers stunned everyone. 0 to 60 in around 5.2 seconds, and a top speed of 177 miles per hour. Faster than the BMW M5, faster than the Mercedes 500e, faster than a Porsche 911 Turbo of the day. The fastest saloon car in the world was a Vauxhall, and that's exactly when the trouble started. Because when the newspapers realized an ordinary family could walk into a showroom and buy a 177-mile-per-hour car for around £48,000, they lost their minds. The headlines screamed about a menace on Britain's roads. And then it reached Parliament. On the 16th of November 1990, the Lotus Carlton was actually named and attacked inside the House of Commons. One MP, Alex Carlile, stood up and said it should not be available for public purchase at all. Another questioned whether anyone could safely drive at such speeds. Even the respected editor of Autocar magazine wrote that Vauxhall should think again and limit the car's top speed. Think about how strange this is. The great and the good of Britain, MPs, chief police officers, national newspapers, all lining up against a single Vauxhall saloon. Not because it had done anything wrong, but because it was simply too good, and ordinary people were allowed to own it. But Vauxhall and General Motors refused to back down. They didn't slow it, they didn't limit it, they put it on sale exactly as it was. And the establishment could do nothing, until, 3 years later, the story took a turn that seemed to prove every one of their fears right. In the early hours of the 25th of November, 1993, a man named Richard was asleep in his home in the quiet Worcestershire village of Wyre Piddle. Just weeks earlier, he'd won a private number plate at auction, 40RA, and proudly fitted it to his own Imperial Green Lotus Carlton, which he used as his everyday family car. That night, the car's alarm woke him. He looked out of the window and saw men breaking into it. He ran downstairs and outside to stop them, and for his trouble, he got a black eye and a wrecked people carrier as the gang smashed past him. Then he heard the Carlton fire up, and they were gone. What followed became one of the most infamous crime stories in British motoring history. For months, that stolen Lotus Carlton, 40RA, was used by a gang for a string of midnight ram raids. They would drive it straight through shop fronts across the West Midlands, grab cigarettes and alcohol, and simply vanish into the night. By the end, they'd taken around £20,000 worth of goods. And the police? They were helpless. Their standard patrol cars, little Rover Metros, could barely touch 90 miles an hour. Chasing a 177-mile-per-hour Carlton was pointless and dangerous. One West Midlands officer, PC David Oliver, openly admitted defeat, saying they simply hadn't been able to get near the thing, and it looked unlikely they ever would. The gang got so bold that they reportedly rammed a newsagent's just a short distance from a police station. The car everyone in power had warned about had become exactly what they feared, and there was nothing anyone could do. The most haunting part? The gang was never caught. And the legend of 40RA, whether it ended crushed, sunk in a canal, or hidden away forever, became a story British car fans still argue about to this day. But the Lotus Carlton's own life was already coming to a quiet end. The car was never a big seller. It was expensive, it arrived during a painful recession, and Vauxhall had aimed too high. When production stopped in December 1992, only around 950 had ever been built, well short of the plan, and that scarcity changed everything. For years, these cars were almost unwanted. Today, the story has completely flipped. A good Lotus Carlton is now a genuine collector's prize, with the very best examples selling for 6 figures. The car the government tried to ban became one of the most treasured British cars of its era. And maybe that's the real truth of the Lotus Carlton. It was built by the boring company nobody respected. It was hated by the people in charge. It was faster than the supercars that cost 3 times as much. And it refused, absolutely refused, to apologize for any of it. It was Britain, at its most defiant. Proof that this country could still build something that frightened the whole world, and do it wearing a Vauxhall badge. So now I want to hear from you. Do you remember the headlines about this car? Do you think Parliament was right to panic? Or was the Lotus Carlton simply too brilliant for its own good? Tell me down in the comments. I read every single one. And if you love the British cars that broke every rule and made the establishment nervous, stay right here. Because this wasn't the only machine Britain built that seem to terrify the very people meant to be in charge. And the next story might be the boldest of them all. If you enjoy forgotten British car stories like this, consider subscribing. There are many more coming every week.